It's not having access to 1 million industrial-grade products that's so amazing. It's the feeling of knowing you'll find the one you need. Grainger, for the ones who get it.
Good evening. The Methuen School Committee Workshop Business Session of February 24 will now come to order. This meeting is being recorded and will be made available for viewing on the Methuen Public Schools website. Please note that any executive sessions are not. I also want to point out that we are live on cable. The YouTube feed has not been working, so the meeting will be posted subsequently on YouTube. It is over. At this point, we will begin with a roll call.
Member Donovan? Member Keegan?
Here.
Member Maxwell?
Here.
Member Shabilia?
Here.
Member Willett? Member Willett?
Here. We have a quorum. Member Willett is joining us remotely via Zoom. We need a motion and a second to accept the agenda.
So moved.
Motion from Member Shabilia, second from the Vice Chair. Discussion? There's no discussion. We'll take a roll call vote.
Member DiZoglio? Member Donovan? Yes. Member Keegan?
Yes.
Member Maxwell?
Yes.
Member Shabilia?
Yes.
Member Willett? Member Beauregard?
Yeah.
Beauregard.
Yes.
Thank you.
Our agenda has been accepted. Now rise. Has anybody signed up for public participation in the crowd, but do we have any written correspondence? No? All right, at this time, I'll close. If you are unable to make a meeting in the future in person for public participation, email to Martha Sorois at masirois@methuen.k12 before 3 p.m. on the day of the school committee meeting. Superintendent, at this time, I'll invite you to begin the discussion regarding the school climate survey results.
Hi, good evening. So we have for you just basically raw data from the family survey that we sent out. So I'd like to give Dr. Golofsky an opportunity just to go through some of these with you all and what our next steps are. We promised that we would have some of this information for you. at this time, so we wanted to workshop.
Thank you. I'm just going to share my screen. Just a moment. Okay. So as Dr. Kwong said, the survey closed last Wednesday when this presentation was put together for you. So this is raw data, just to give you an idea of the responses that we received. And our next steps will be to take a look at this in comparison to the vocal data. Our youth participatory action research teams from each school have also been digging into the student data, and will likewise look at the family data as well. So I'll go through topic by topic, and if there's something of interest or if you have a question, please feel free to interject. So the survey was developed by Panorama and the questions were developed by Dr. Gelbach and his team from the Harvard Graduate School of Education. This is a popular survey to give around the Commonwealth, around the nation, and the whole survey has several topics. So here we chose school safety, engagement, and climate. There's also other sections that come with the survey that relate to grit, or barriers to engagement, levels of family support. Panorama typically recommends focusing on a couple sections, which is why we chose the 3, which aligned with the vocal survey data. So after the survey was publicized to families, aware that families who had students in multiple schools throughout the district wished to respond depending on school where they had their students. So I sent a follow-up message to families and said, if you wish to do so, submitted a survey, please let me know. I heard back from one parent who said they did, and the others had held off to respond until I sent that message. So ultimately, 805 surveys were submitted with 1,122 students represented. And you can see the breakdown. Try to navigate the slides on the computer here. You can see the breakdown of responses per school, and then lower school and upper school, and of course, high school students. And so the surveys were administered using the survey platform called SurveyMonkey. And SurveyMonkey also produces the charts and graphs that you'll see tonight. So to begin, this is some information that we just wanted to figure out how students were hearing information about or from the school district. And you can see here, email is predominantly the source that families rely on, as well as talking points. There's some variation in terms of social media and families from different schools using social media accounts. The high school and some parent groups are the only real social media presence we have from the school system, so we found that to be pretty interesting. In terms of family engagement topics, the questions asked how often parents have visited their child's school within the past year, how often they've discussed their child's school with parents from that school within the past year, how often they've helped out, met in person with teachers, been involved in a parent group, and raising efforts. So we weren't completely surprised by what we saw here. In terms of visiting the child's school, we do get a fair attendance for open house or parent conferences. So the once or twice, I would say that dark blue area is representative of that. We've been deliberate in trying to create more opportunities during the daytime for parents to come into school, but certainly more areas for growth there. I was slightly surprised on this item about how often parents discuss their child's school with parents from that school. Frankly, I thought that it would be a higher rate, but we saw across most schools that a third of the parents almost never discuss their child's school, maybe for a variety of reasons. The helping out at the child's school. Meeting in person. And being involved with a parent group. So perhaps LPAC, CPAC, PTO. Fundraising efforts. So there's slight variation in some items between schools. And that brings us to school climate. So the first question asks, to what extent do you think that children enjoy going to your child's school? So children in general. And this is the parent perception. So the more favorable colors would be the orange or teal at the top here. And then green would represent. So I will point out too, the grammar school numbers are K through 8, so lower and upper combined. When I did parse them out to see if it was worth separating and displaying them differently, there wasn't much difference between upper school and lower school, so I kept them together. This slide speaks to how motivating the classroom lessons are as perceived by the parents. This was interesting because certainly judging from the few occasions in which most parents have come into the school, this would, I would imagine, be they're relying on the students' report of how they're finding their lessons to be. So the Marsh had a favorable rating, so again looking for that orange or teal, as did the CGS, slightly more than half, and others just a bit behind. Next question dealt with how fair or unfair the school system of evaluating children is, so the grading system. Said that they found the evaluation system to be very fair, somewhat fair, or slightly fair. And there's some representation for very unfair. How much the school values diversity of children's backgrounds. CGS coming in with nearly 30% at a tremendous amount, and the other schools at about 20% for that tremendous amount. How well the administrators at your child's school create a school environment that helps children learn. Again, looking at the teal and orange. In most cases, more than half respondents responded with quite well or extremely well. And these next slides I separated because I thought it was interesting. They had to deal with the topic of respect. So there were two questions. One being, how much respect do you think the children at your child's school have for the staff? And then the inverse, how much respect do you think the teachers at your child's school have for the children? And the reason I found this interesting was that both in lower school, upper school, and also at the high school, parents generally responded that they felt teachers at their child's school had more respect for the children than they felt the children did for the staff, which I thought was interesting. And so this first slide here is showing lower school. And I'm looking at the tremendous amounts to quite a bit. This slide shows the upper school, so the difference is smaller here, but still trending toward more respect for the children. And then the high school. And on to school safety. How often do you worry about violence at your child's school? So we range from almost never to almost always. Sometimes representations were high here. If a student is bullied at your child's school, how difficult is it for him or her to get help from an adult? The green represents not at all difficult, and orange, extremely difficult. So at all schools, more than half said not at all or slightly difficult. The somewhat sizable amount as well. And there's some representation for quite difficult or extremely. How likely is it that someone from your child's school will bully him or her online? Not likely and slightly likely are the most predominant categories. Overall, how unsafe does your child feel at school? So the green is not at all unsafe. The blue, slightly unsafe. To what extent are drugs a problem at your child's school? Not at all a problem. In the grammar schools, at least 60% of respondents said not a problem. At the high school, at least not at all a problem or a little bit of a problem. And finally, school fit. These questions dealt with the sense of belonging. So how much of a sense does your child feel at his or her school? And we're back to aiming for those orange and teal bars. So in most cases, more than half of respondents said quite a bit of belonging or a tremendous amount. This is tied into one of our strategic objectives. At your child's school, how well does the overall approach to discipline work for your child? Here we have some slight upticks in mildly well or not well, but still more than half or nearly more than half in the quite well or extremely well categories. Given your child's cultural background, how good a fit is his or her school? The marsh with the highest rating, 70% of families saying quite good to extremely good. And how well do the activities offered at your child's school match their interests? Just a change in view here in the graph. So how comfortable is your child asking for help from adults? So a little bit lower in terms of the rating of as compared to that sense of belonging. a little bit more in the somewhat area than in the quite or extremely comfortable, but predominantly comfortable. How well do the teaching styles of your child's teachers match your child's learning style? I believe this is the last one. How well do you feel your child's school is preparing him or her for their next academic year? So more than 70% across the board feel fairly well, quite well, to extremely well. Okay, so again, these results were just coming in. The survey is now closed. We intend to share the results with the leadership team to dig in a little bit deeper and to notice some trends as we examine things more closely, with the ultimate goal of determining areas of or targeted actions on which we can improve in some of these areas.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Questions, comments? Member Maxwell?
So I think that this survey was just not our best survey, and I know that you didn't develop it, so there's not to go off of. I feel like even when we couldn't answer from more than one child, like you adjusted that and that was good, but still only 200 parents out of however many. I mean, I think it was 800 responses out of the whole district, and we have 7,000 students, you know, so I think that looking at these results, like, they don't look terrible, but 48 people is 20% of the votes, you know, like, it's just a very low number to even have a survey on, because it doesn't serve any of the purpose that we wanted it to, and the fact that we didn't have like a comment section on certain things, I think that was a concern for a lot of parents. So if we could add that feature, maybe that would be good for another. But I mean, it looks decent. It just stinks that only 100 and something parents participated. I wish that more parents would participate. Everybody wants to change everything, but we can't change things if nobody participates in things like that. That's all.
Yeah, I think, and I just want to comment, because it is hard to see. I think my first comment to Dr. Golubsky was like, I just wanted to reach 1,000, like 1,000 responses at least, to represent more students. And I think our reach was multiple, right? We had talking points, we had principals, Lisa sent it multiple times, people posted on Facebook. So it is challenging. It's also challenging, and we probably spent a good 20 minutes talking about that first couple questions, where so while we had a people filling the survey out, the people that did, half of them never talked to another person about their child's school or school experience, was mind-blowing to us. So there is some information here to glean. We want the first time we have done this survey and these questions to see what our youth group makes of these questions. I do think there's a whole bunch here to break down, right? So when, and just this is an example of that. My definition of how often am I worried about violence in school may be very different than your definition as a parent of violence in school. So that may be something that we want to break down a little bit, right? And talking to the kids and talking to the leadership, like, there's definitely still things that we want to glean from this, and we don't want it to be again, we want to take from this and see how we can expand it. This is something that we're committed to doing and trying to get more parent feedback, so there's room to grow here. But we do think there are spots of opportunity like that we really want our youth group to focus on and break down a little bit for us. And then our leadership team, who, again, when we define violence, when we define bullying, when we define those things, what is it actually, how do we break that apart to identify? That's helpful, but that question alone, I think, is the one that really surprised us the most. So they filled out the survey, never had a conversation with another parent about their child's school, ever. And so that's, that doesn't feel like what we experience, so that was, sort of the why behind that might be something to expand on as well. But, again, there's a little bit here. I really was hoping for a bigger response. We did try to make it easy and put it in enough languages so people could do it on their phone. SurveyMonkey is so good that way that you can do it on your phones, and so we'll keep working at it, and we'll talk to other school districts about how they get maybe more participation. Dr. Golubsky also reminded me that 17% isn't an awful statistic, believe it or not, when you're talking about boys. So we spoke about that. I just wanted a little higher. But it's not an awful response when you're talking about like research and surveys. It's again, not what we're hoping for because we have so many now not represented here. But there's enough
I
here.
didn't mean that it wasn't pushed out well enough.
Oh, no, I know. People just
didn't
were apathetic.
respond.
Yeah, like why? I mean, now I want to know why people didn't take it. What was it that made them not take it? It was completely anonymous. There was no way we can identify who filled this out. SurveyMonkey doesn't give us that information. So, maybe there's a trust factor here too that we have to build with parents. This is really for us to figure out what we're doing. What are we doing well? What do we need to work on? How do the students, interpret it? And see how well it matches with what the students are saying, right, on their vocal survey and what our parents' interpretation of that is. They should be matching. And we'll work through it and see what the next round will bring or add to what we ask parents. Fascinating work, though.
Member Shabilia?
So I was going to say that 17% is not half bad. I mean, it's not
In the
half good
research
either.
world, I
but, like,
know, we
it's
want
not half
more,
bad.
I know. Yeah, but when you're talking about statistics, I know.
Yeah, I did want to agree with Member Maxwell. I would have at least one question with 140 character max, or someone could put something in there. I can tell you why a lot of people didn't answer it the first time I opened and respond, because it was 1,000 questions long. And when I looked at it from my phone, I went, I don't have the mental capacity to handle this right now, and I closed out of it. Feedback I got from a lot of people, it was a lot of questions. Not that the questions were bad, but there was just a lot of them, and to do that from your phone is tedious. And with adults or my friends who have young kids who can focus on one thing for that long. So that being said, going through this quickly, I did notice a couple of patterns. So I'd be curious to see what your teams come. Do you have a timeline on when that's all going to happen? Tentatively, anyways?
Well, we have another quarterly leadership meeting that might be good to discuss it there. But I also think when you talked about the open response, I think once we drill down and think about what are the areas we really need to focus on, that's the opportunity to put those questions there so we can code and quantify those responses. But I would say sometimes I'm overzealous. Next month.
I'm not going to hold
Yeah.
you to it.
We have our whole administrative leadership together. Group, I don't think is scheduled to actually meet again, so the whole youth group from grades 5 to 8, about 80 kids or so, you said? They are also meeting next week. I just don't know how much they're going to get through. That's a lot of kids to try to get through this information, so they meet once a month. Like that.
For
wanna
the
do
next
March.
workshop, I'll give another quarterly.
Okay.
I'll have an update for you
All right.
then.
Yeah, and I mean, I'd be curious to see what the feedback is, because there were a couple of notes I made, and I would really like to see what they think and how we now action what we've come up with.
And I'm sure you understand this, we hemmed and hawed survey, we didn't have any opportunity to open a question, but know that if we open a question, now we have to have a method, right? So what are we coding for? Specific, right? So what are we coding for to actually have it make sense? Or is it just you want to read 1,000 different comments on different topics, right? Because that's a whole different scenario. And so we just have to kind of figure out what that looks like and how we code that.
And that's
right?
part of the reason you have to character limit those things. Otherwise, you're going to have people who are going to monologue in that box for
Right.
as long as that box will hold.
Right.
Not useful information anymore. But
Vice Chair?
So the one that kind of stuck out for me was how motivating are the classroom lessons. And I say that because it's my understanding that grammar schools are getting the same lessons. And within the grades, there are lessons. And so it's fascinating to me that, say, the Marsh finds them incredibly motivating and the Timony. And so I'd really like to dig down into the difference between the two schools, because I notice on a lot of the data, the Marsh comes out pretty high and the Timony comes out pretty low. And so what's happening between schools that we're getting those sort of responses that are different? And the percentages are just different. So that's kind of where I'm surprised. That's all.
No, those are all good points, obviously, that we're going to be digging into.
Member DiZoglio?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the only thing that I looked at it, and I know it doesn't affect the whole student population, but like IEPs and 504s, like, do you feel like your child's accommodations are being met? Do they feel like they are getting those proper, like, when you go to meetings, do you feel like your IEPs are being met? Do you feel like how the meetings, I said, well, maybe we should add, because that would be great data too, to see where that population as well is being affected. Survey might be totally different. We can't just put a Dropbox in, but I would know that type of data too, how parents are feeling when it comes to those things. And I think by doing that, then we can work on that specific area too as well, like making sure our special ed population is getting those accommodations and being met, and the parents don't feel like there's combative when it comes to their IEPs and 504 meetings and stuff like that, because I know in the last 5 years I've had come up to me and say, I feel like my child's not being met. So I would just be curious, because, you know, you get that 1-2 parents out of a whole population, they're the ones speaking out the loudest, but I would like to see specific groups are being affected.
Member Donovan?
First of all, I'd like to say thank you for doing this. I know it came as a directive from this school committee.
That's part of our strategic plan.
Yeah. You
Important
kind
to
of
do.
got pushed
Yeah.
a little, and I appreciate it. I'm sorry. I know there were some people who had some very valid concerns and expressed it. And I'm sorry we didn't catch some of this, because we were privy to these questions before, correct? They were in our packet. So hindsight is 20/20. Lesson learned for me anyway. So I have two questions. Number one, you had said something I kind of about the question about from what source do you get the most information from the school or district?
Mm-hmm.
And what did you say, Dr. I'm sorry, it came to me afterwards.
I
Something about
believe
social
I
media?
highlighted that most people are looking to email or text to get their information. And every school sends a weekly newsletter, but I know some people go to that regularly, but or they're getting the bulk of their information. What I was surprised about was the number of parents using social media to get their information.
Oh,
Apart from a lot of athletic groups at the high primarily or parent-run groups. The schools don't run social or sites, so I wonder about the accuracy of the information. So that's something I was just starting to think about. And then the poor website doesn't get many hits, but other than that,
Yeah, that's too bad.
Yeah.
That's too bad. Okay, thanks for that. And, you talked about the leadership team and students. The teachers, the staff going to get, how will they be able to access this if they're not watching tonight?
Yeah, we're not sure yet.
Okay, I think that would,
There's just,
I'm
there's
sure they'd be.
it's the time of day, how we're gonna do this by, once the leader, how do they now get it to the grade level teams to make
Yeah.
some sense of it? We have 2 half-day PDs left that, which are already encumbered with, professional development, but that is something that we want to talk about with the leadership team. It's important for the teachers to make some sense of it. Best to do smaller groups, not district, but smaller groups within the schools, led by some of the teams at the. So
And-
that's something that we'll talk about with them next week. I think we meet with them on Tuesday.
And if I can just throw out, I think what you brought up was a really good point. Like, I wondered if this was a invitation. Haverhill has sent out a survey, mainly around the budget. I don't know if you saw it. I just saw it today. So I'm really curious. They're asking the community for input. So I'm really curious to see what their response rate is going to be. So that'll be good to compare. Okay, thank you.
Member Willett, is there anything?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just my concerns would be in terms of the bullying and the drug use and the violence. If we could go into a deeper dive on those components. And again, it could be a limitation of a survey of going into detail with the parents, what that vehicle would entail. I'll defer to the social scientists on that. I think there was some concerns raised that we would have to go further into either additional questions or some type of survey option and limit the response, obviously, because we don't want to go in pages. But I think there was some concerning issues with the bullying and the drug use and the violence, at least from a perception standpoint. So that's something, again, as a school district, we should be on top of. And obviously, there's a perception, and sometimes the perception doesn't meet necessarily the reality. But I would like to go into a deeper dive on those issues, if possible, in a future survey vehicle. Thank you.
I think that'll do it for the discussion regarding the school climate survey. We'll move on now to the mid-year goal discussion with the superintendent.
Thank you. So it looks a little different, because I know last year we had a document and it was well-received, and I hope this is well-received as well. But this is something that I have a key on the front page of with a strategic plan and which action items and which evidence actually matches my goals. So everything is completely it would have been incredibly large and cumbersome to actually make photocopies of all of them. I hope you were able to go interactively and click on the different links and the newsletters and the goals and the plans and the spreadsheets that are using to collect data. And so, I just sort of put a summary there. It is pretty remarkable. We met with the principals and our central office team in January and February to really take a good look at where we are in our strategic plan, which, a lot of what we have focused on this year and our conversations and the time that has taken, and we have still been able to accomplish quite a few things at this point in time in this strategic plan, so I'm proud of that. And of course, there's always more, which we will continue to do, and I will continue to lead those actions. So I'm really here to ask, this is my evidence to you so that you have it. We discussed this last year so that you are not given a whole book of evidence in June and trying to figure out where it fits, so that you have a little bit of stuff as we go along to really get a sense of the work that we're doing. The one thing I do also want to say is that the data sheets that are included in the evidence for you to look through, I hope everybody understands those are completely cleared out with information, because anything that's used in my evaluation is public documentation, and we can't have that confidential student information possibly out there. So we cleared out some of the use of templates, so some of the things that you'll see might have numbers or something in a column or dates, but you won't see the student or the grade level, and that is all for that confidentiality purpose. So I guess I would open it up to questions about anything that was in here, or?
Member Shabilia?
When we did this last time, we needed do we need to do that again?
Yeah, so yes, but you won't need to create that until June. The evaluation subcommittee, we typically do in June at that last meeting where I give you my final evidence. And then the subcommittee will meet over the summer and then be able to meet with me before the school committee actually reviews my evaluation publicly in August. But yes, you will have a subcommittee.
Any other questions or discussion?
And I'm sorry, I guess it's at the will of the committee if that timeline changes, but that is the timeline, I believe, that's in my contract, and has to be, my evaluation has to be to DESI in the fall.
Discussion?
So thorough, lots to click on. I hope this was this manner in having it be electronic with all the evidence there better? Because, okay. Because I will format the final pieces of evidence this way. I do think it's a better I can put more there, right? It's easier for us to organize this and actually give you a better feel for the work that's actually being done, instead of just picking a couple of those things and photocopying. We're just going to continue to add to the newsletter, add the things that we're doing, so it's all there for you to view.
So is there a deliverable on this? Do we have to, so for this review, do we have to complete the mid-year one? And
No.
then, no, so this is just check-in.
This is just of the annual process
Okay.
of I'm supposed to give you guys some evidence mid-year. And honestly, most folks in my positions don't give a narrative. I just think over the past few years, we've learned it's just much easier to now, so you have something to understand and think about, and you're not trying to put it all together in a couple weeks in June.
All right.
Any other discussion, questions? Going twice? All right, we'll move on. Lastly, on the agenda, we have the JRA staff access to student information policy. We need a motion and a second to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Motion from the vice chair, second from member Shabilia. Discussion?
I'm just confused. I thought staff already has access. Like, what is this, extending it to?
Yeah, so Member Keegan and I have had multiple conversations about this. Member Keegan, I think, brought this up in the fall, here first. And we're still finding there were some holes in the process of staff having access. So it's not about staff having access during the school day, making sure that staff have full access to student records of whom they are doing extracurricular activities, coaching. We don't just open up Infinite Campus so that everybody has access to everybody's student records. Does that make sense? So people just doesn't have 2,000 kids at the high school. That's not how student records works. So we definitely found that there are certain groups that are well, groups that are not doing this well. And so I hope I captured this when we wrote it. This was based on, again, several conversations with Member Keegan and Ms. Bozak. It's rosters aren't enough, I guess. So like if you have a coach, right, our coaches might have access to attendance and grades, but we need more than that, right? The coaches, our student advisors, our advisors taking kids to Boston for DECA, they need to actually see the student record to see if there are any health concerns, if there are any 504 accommodations, if there's anything that maybe they need to know about or are required to apply to a particular activity. So we're really just expanding that and making sure that we do it. And Dr. Golubsky, myself, and Matt Serqua are fine-tuning that right now to make sure that we have the right access to the right people.
Any other questions?
Did I capture that, Member Keegan?
Vice Chair?
I can expand on it a little bit. So last school year, not this school year, but last school year, I ran into an issue with my children that the extracurricular people did not have access to accommodations. And we seem to have gotten it fixed last year, and then one of my students decided to do a different activity this year. And again, that the new group of people access to the accommodations or a safety plan, et cetera. And so then when I started digging, I realized that, well, you know, Little Rangers needs access. You know, there's health issues that some students have that, you know, you need access to this because they didn't have access to Infinite Campus to get the information. And so I've had, like Dr. Kwong said, I have had multiple about this because it could be a safety issue, right? And so I really wanted to make sure that, you know, while I've been assured that it's going to be fixed, get a policy so that it's in everybody's mind that this really needs to be done for all students across the board, pre-K to 12, or even to 22, depending on if we have kids in the post-grad program. That's where it's coming from, because I just want to make sure that no student falls through the cracks for any activity.
Member Maxwell?
I had just assumed that this was a thing. I thought that if they had access to that child, that they would have access to their records. But do teachers, I guess teachers specifically, do they have access to their kids before school starts? I know, like, we don't assign teachers until the start of school, but do they get those records before, since they have such a big amount of kids?
They get their student rosters like a day before, 2 days before.
So they don't have time to review their 504s and their health situations or anything like that?
They have the first week or so of school to do it.
Okay.
They begin contractual time that first day that they report back.
Oh, okay. I see.
Okay.
Other questions, discussion? Member Donovan?
I just want to make sure I understand. So this
Yes.
is on a need-to-know basis?
Correct.
Okay, so for the specific staff member working with a child, it's not, Infinite Canvas is open to everybody?
No,
Okay,
that's what
thank
I'm
you.
saying.
I just want to make sure.
Dr. Golubsky, Matt Serqua, and I are working on what Infinite Campus is capable of, because it's a little tricky. Some things rosters to and make it very specific, and some things we can't. So we have to put safeguards in place to make sure if I do open it up, that I have and can view who is looking at student records and track it that way.
Okay, I
So
think that's
those are the
important.
things we're
Yeah.
putting in place right now. So it's again, we just found like certain rosters are in space and then certain things are not. But also at the grammar schools, this wasn't a thing. And so it needs to be a thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
thank you.
like, remember Keegan said, it's going to be too. We have to find a way to make sure that it's accessible, that the staff knows the expectation of what they need to review. The only other group of people that we have to have a plan for, and that's up to us, that's why it's not here, right? We have to decide it, is the staff, full-time employees in Methuen, but maybe coming from another school, they're not going to have access at all to Infinite Campus because they're with any kind of roster. So that's sort of a less of a group, but another group that we're working through right now with Matt Cirqua. There's a way to do it. It's just going to look a little different for those folks. Yep, you're welcome.
Any other questions or discussion? Member Willett, anything to add?
Just like, do we need to do any legal references here in terms of privacy, like the Privacy Act of 1974 or school-related privacy laws? Do we need to incorporate that? I'm assuming everyone's on the same page that we have to abide by privacy laws. Does that need to be incorporated into the body in some fashion?
I can certainly ask Attorney Maccaro. I don't think it does, but we can ask to make sure for the second read that we don't have to incorporate something. The piece that I will incorporate when I put the process in place, the procedure, with staff that they're going to have to sign off on. That if to students, because we're opening access in a larger way, that they don't privacy and records. But I will definitely inquire.
Because, again, obviously, the vice chair, in terms of accommodation, I'm in agreement that the personnel should have knowledge of that information, but also in terms of just common sense of we still want to protect the files of students and have some type of reality agreement or some type of disclosure of the Privacy Act of 1974 or related student privacy law, federal level or at the state level, something that could be incorporated into the body in conjunction with that confidentiality agreement. They'll have to be signed anyways.
I can ask.
Other than that, I'll vote in favor of the proposal. I think it's something that we should do.
We can?
I just have one more question. Regarding the coaches, I know you said it's something you have to figure out, but do they go through the same process if they're not employees? Like, are they EpiPen trained? Are they all of those things?
Yes.
Yes.
So the difference
Quarried,
is that
sorried.
they don't have a roster in Infinite Campus for student management because they don't have, they're not here full-time during the school day. So it's much easier for us to manage the staff because they already have a full account for our state reporting and everything else. So a handful that are coming from other places that are just coaching right now, and that's the group that we're going to have to potentially do printed files or something with confidentiality.
At this point, we are ready to take the vote. We'll have a roll call.
Member DiZoglio?
Yes.
Member Donovan?
Yes.
Member Keegan?
Yes.
Member Maxwell?
Yes.
Member Shabilia?
Yes.
Member Willett? Member Willett?
Sounded like a yes.
It was a yes.
Yes. Mayor Beauregard?
Yes.
Unanimous.
All right, that passes. Do we have any other business from the committee? Something to add, but Member Donovan?
Okay. Yeah, just a very quick question. I know there was a discussion briefly last week, I had to step out, about the training that we all had agreed to under Member DiZoglio's leadership. Wondering if we have a plan in place. I certainly have done some research and looked at some ideas, and I'm hoping we can move forward on that.
That might be something that we can add to perhaps
For
the next
week.
agenda.
Yeah, thank you.
Great. I'll quickly follow up with something. So I've heard some feedback from some residents regarding, of course, the cell phone ban in our schools, and the response that I've heard by and large has been favorable. And it's something that I think, this is something we can have perhaps on the next agenda for some further discussion. I don't know if perhaps we need to look at a policy, but I think it would behoove us as a committee to consider the prospect of a cell phone and right here at our table. I just think that it's something that, we're asking to do that. Perhaps we as elected officials, as leaders, should do the same. So that's something that I would like to have on the next meeting agenda.
Okay.
Business to discuss at, we need a motion and a second to adjourn of February 24th, 2025.
So moved.
Second.
Motion from Member Shabilia, second from the Vice Chair. We will have a roll call to adjourn.
Member DiZoglio?
Yes.
Member Donovan?
Yes.
Member Keegan?
Yes.
Member Maxwell?
Yes.
Member Shabilia?
Yes.
Member Willett?
Yes.
Mayor Beauregard?
Yes. The time is approximately 6:55 PM, and our meeting is adjourned.
Good night, Methuen.